Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's show is being broadcast live from DCTV's Studio A. Thanks as always to Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Mo Jackson, audio, Rhonda Starks, teleprompter, Cruchet Starnes, floor director, and Mark Wesley, VTR operator. Today's show is on getting your bearings. Next week's show is going to be about the original owners of Capitol Hill Real Estate. This has been an eventful 2 weeks since our last live broadcast. I've been in Canada on a family vacation last week. When I did my last day home, what I did was I went to purchase a handgun. I gave my handgun qualifying license to the gun shop where I bought my gun, and am now waiting to hear back for permission to pick up my gun. There are probably 11 million firearms in Canada and about, well over 3 million owners of firearms in Canada. Why am I telling you this? Because the governments need to know that there are many, many gun owners who are fully aware of the corruption in the international financial system. This system is now on course to meltdown, depriving us of our pensions, our homes, and our other assets. The governments need to know of the bottom line reality that we are not going to accept this meltdown and transfer of our assets. This reality is there to provide a sense of perspective. It's so that the elites can get their bearings too. Some of you may know that what happened to me on the morning of August 6th, on the day that I arrived on the island of Gabriola in British Columbia, which is one of the Gulf Islands near Victoria. My family and I were in a cottage together, and I was just minding my business, and then by scalar technology, I was zapped. I lost my balance, my speech was affected. How do I know that this was an attack and not just a stroke? It's because the goons that were simultaneously attacking me were also attacking the woman who was helping to protect my family, and they also attacked Pete Thornton at the same time. You may recall that Pete Thornton is the engineer who has been making sure that we can print replacement Treasury dollars from the Bureau of Printing and Engraving in Fort Worth, Texas. Fortunately, we're all recovering. As you can tell from my live broadcast this evening, I spoke with Pete Thornton yesterday, and he's also making a very good recovery. During this week that I've been traveling back to my home and recovering from the attack, you've seen that there are many people involved. I'm so grateful to all of you. This is very meaningful. It tells the entire world that there is resistance to the network of global corporate control, and that this resistance will carry on. Let me tell you who is in this network of global corporate control. It's a very large company that thinks we are too stupid to know the difference between reality and the lies and deception from the network of global corporate control. This network prints paper money and bribes many unscrupulous people with their worthless paper. Enough of us know about the scam that it can no longer continue. That is what I told a man who called himself Julius Shiva. We had this conversation on the 3rd of August and also on the 4th. Julius was telling me that he would give me the Euroclear account reference numbers for the Global Debt Facility. The Global Debt Facility is a large trust that contains all of the world's monetary gold reserves. It also contains gemstones, art treasures, and other precious metals. Most importantly, the global debt facility contains the Treaty of Versailles bonds worth more than $2 quadrillion, which is sufficient to offset all of country debt. Here is the inventory list of the assets in the global debt facility. As the lawyer for the 188 ministers of finance and development that administer the global debt facility, I did not have to wait for anything from Julius Shiva. Julius Shiva was not making a good impression on me by asking me to simply ignore the ministers of finance and development on the board of governors of the World Bank and IMF. I was not going to ignore the 188 ministers of finance and development, and I told Julius Shiva that. The last thing I told Julius Shiva before he hung up on me was that the chances of the global currency reset going forward without Julius Shiva's help were greater than 90%, and also that all of humanity in its collective unconscious was insisting on cleaning up the corruption. How did I know to speak for the collective unconscious? That's because I've been very privileged to work with the people of Ghana, who have very strong customs. They told me that many of them act as if they had an elderly ancestor sitting on their shoulder, listening and watching to every single thing they do. Julius Shiva was insisting on my working with him, and I told Julius Shiva that I had no authority to do so, that I wasn't going to negotiate with him, that every single ounce of my authority came from the Board of Governors who had approved the global currency reset to replace paper currency with the world's monetary gold reserves. The last thing I was saying before Julius hung up on me was that there was no way I was going to act independently from the Board of Governors, and that Julius should have a closer look at the role of the Board of Governors according to the bilateral Minesfield Breakthrough Successor Agreement. This is an agreement that was signed at the end of World War II. So let me give you some background information. The bilateral Minesfield Breakthrough Successor Agreement was concluded on the 11th of August 1950 and was to put the assets on deposit, sequestered. That's a fancy word for being put in hiding. Who put the assets on deposit? It was Jose Rizal, who was the Black Pope. That's the Superior General of the Society of Jesus. The reason for the 50 years of sequestration was so that any competing claims would terminate, so that when you hear anything about dragons or claims, you know that this is disinformation trying to confuse you. It's not reliable. I get many emails asking me, what is correct? Please do me a favor and join in a small group of people whom you enjoy discussing things with and meet regularly. I have been learning critical thinking too. That is why when Wolfgang Struck told me that a man with many siblings was not the true son of his parents, that's Jose Rizal, and had been adopted, I decided to look into the matter, and I found out that indeed Jose Rizal was 100% of the Malay race. It was when I found this out that someone sent me the minutes of the meeting at the Central Bank of the Philippines of January 3, 1949. Why did we have our family vacation in Gabriola Island? This is because my best friend Helene van Hardenberg's brother lives on Gabriola, and I was able to visit him there twice. Some people may recall my visit to Helene a couple of years ago. While I was recuperating from the scalar attack, I was surrounded by my family, all of whom were trying to help. My two daughters, they flew home to make sure that I had proper care, and there was a lot of work at home because during the week we were away, somehow we ended up with a flooded basement and broken air conditioning system, then there was my 92-year-old mother to reassure. And not least of all, there was the responsibility of keeping the global currency reset and active blogging community updated. I believe this experience has taught all of us something. In the middle of everything, my niece has a wedding that's going to happen in a month. I have a high school reunion coming up and a law school reunion too. I'm also supposed to be learning the cello part for a performance at the end of August. To the people who are following my social media that are wondering if this has been a setback, I say to them, we are going from strength to strength. People see the depth of the resistance, and they see how we are all determined and how our mettle has been tested, and in every way, we're still there and we're still pitching. There's no alternative but replacing that scam called paper currency. When I explained to my family and friends that their very closeness to me was putting them in harm's way, some of them drew back. And so this tells me that humanity, most of them didn't draw back, and that means that our bonds of love are strong enough to stand up to the very heart of evil and prevail. As inept and imperfect and inadequate as we may be, individually, in a group, we can get the job done. I like to tell people about my story, which is not especially distinguished, just because it's through this ordinary, normal human experience that our strength comes. I learned martial arts from my Hungarian fencing coach, and so I will not flinch under attack because I know that under attack, that's my time to score. And from Aaron Broches, who was the Dutch lawyer, he was the one who negotiated the Articles of Agreement of the World Bank and IMF, and he taught me how important the World Bank's legal department is, that it was a very special place to be. Once there, you've all seen that I will do my duty just because it's the place where good must prevail. To those people who say this is not so, I challenge them to prove otherwise. The burden must be on the naysayers to demonstrate there's no wealth for humanity, no goodness from the sweat of man's brow. The other lesson I've taken from recent events is how good laughter is. Maybe this will not tickle your funny bone. One of my daughters went to our neighborhood swimming pool one night and was not too careful about her clothes. And so somehow a piece of her underwear ended up in the driveway. Who found the article of clothing the next morning? Her father. His simple question, how the underpants ended up in the driveway, this was enough to send me and my other daughter into hoops of laughter. And then, when we retold my husband's question to my mother the next day, this kept on getting better, especially when we added up the lack of air conditioning and burst boiler and legal liability questions about dishonored warranties, and we added in an irate police officer who was turned away because there was no medical emergency. Our home was a disaster zone, and it was not improved any by the irate cries of Siamese cats that had a way of carrying out into the neighborhood. So even though there may be slapstick involved, the global currency reset is serious business. We're simply not afraid, and we're not turning back from the yellow brick road. What else will happen along the way? Who knows? We will take it in stride. I know this, having just negotiated Geico Emergency Roadside Service telephone automated answering, along with their Muzak. Did you know that the car dispatch service for police vehicles was deliberately set to a frequency that would reduce people to brutes? I think Geico's Muzak has the same purpose. One daughter disapproved of my vocabulary after this provocation and certainly did not welcome my use, repeated, of the moniker dingbat. If there's time, we can rerun some of the previous episode about what happened to Anton Scalia. I'm not too proud to repeat myself. I also like to show this picture of the switchboard operator because it illustrates one of my functions, which is to relay information in the global currency reset. In the past weeks, I've received many messages from people who think that by contacting me, I will vouch for them and their information. I'm not going to serve them, to save them the trouble of first earning people's trust, and I'm also not in a position to verify people's claims. And most people know by now that the newspapers, television, movies, and publishers are owned by the network of global corporate control and do not present accurate, unbiased news. As a matter of fact, the history that people have been taught, the medical, legal, journalism professions are all highly suspect. I've told you from Moscow State University and Professor Anatoly Fomenko that our ancient history has been fabricated and systematically rewritten. And since then, I felt the centuries are all mixed up. It was from Nick Blaine that I learned this. It's by working together with others we can sort out truth from falsehood. One of the things people at DCTV have taught me is to take videos. Here is a video of the seaplane which I took from Victoria International Airport to Gabriola Island. And there's a 41-second clip somewhere. Show something, but they don't have to. Okay, I'm told that you want to hear my stellar voice, so I'll be happy to tell you about it. There's actually on the teleprompter you can see some of the emails that I was sending to various people through the years. I started out with the idea that lawyers were actually useful in documenting the corruption. And so I just kept going to various parties. I can tell you who I went to, and it was a very humbling experience because I kept thinking that after I had demonstrated all of the corruption, that this was somehow going to resolve things. So I started out going to the U.S. Government Accountability Office to have them audit the corruption at the World Bank. Then I found out that something called the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, that's where all the government's auditors are members. I found out that that was all corrupt. I went to the accounting profession, and I found out that all the accountants were corrupt. And when I was pointing this out, I was working together with Elaine Colville on that. When I pointed this out, the accountants were saying, well, it was really my fault because I was obviously the problem. Then I went to the European Community. I just went to anybody that that I could. I was going to all of the attorneys general. I was going to all of the governors, and I didn't just go to them once. I went back to them many times. It was, believe me, they were not happy to hear from me. But I just kept documenting this because I couldn't conceive of the fact that everything was totally corrupt. But what I've now succeeded in documenting, when I went to the Universal Postal Union and documented that the Postmaster General, that was corrupt, and the U.S. Postmaster General, Megan Brennan, was also corrupt. There's nowhere else to go, actually, except I just keep documenting this again and again. And the way I did it is the way you're supposed to do it when you're an in-house lawyer. A lot of people say, well, if you're a whistleblower, that means that you've got to shut up at some point. But if you're a special legal whistleblower and you've documented the corruption, you actually have an obligation to expose the corruption, which is what I did. And so on any given day, there is not a day that goes by that I've got something hidden to tell people. I'm just the world's biggest blabbermouth. And what's even worse is I'm happy to expose any of the other pieces of information that disclose how corrupt the world is. It is absolutely, from top to bottom, corrupt. And all of the governments, they're just lying to people. And when we understand exactly the depth of the corruption, that's when we can clean it up. And the point about it is not, we don't have to rush. There's only one thing we have to rush at, and that is to replace the paper currencies, because they are going to crash. And when paper currencies crash, that means that somebody gets your house for very free, next to nothing. It means that somebody gets your pension that you've worked all these years to pay into for next to nothing. The stock markets are just completely, they're dishonest. They're just, some people call it the casino. So we have the opportunity now to start from the ground up and to work systematically to clean up this corruption. And a lot of people want to know what my plans are for this. And the answer to that is I am not going to be in charge. Nobody should be in charge. What we need to have is we need to have a decentralized approach so that all of the local communities are issuing their own local currencies, and we'll have national currencies as well, completely out of gold. And some people say, well, why not silver? And the answer to that is if people want their currency out of silver, that's perfect. We're not requiring people to accept the gold, but the fact of the matter is there is more than enough gold so that you can put that gold in your currency. And some people say, well, how did we happen to have all this gold? And the reason why is because humanity's history is much longer than people are keeping track of. It's much, much longer. We know this because if you look at the maps, it turns out that the Ice Age, the previous Ice Age, was the poles were underwater, and you can tell that our history is much longer than we have. It's much longer than the 6,000 years that we're told. So you can start out when you're taught history. Start out by being very, very skeptical. That's probably one of the first things that we're going to have to work on. We're going to have to learn how to be skeptical, how to take things with a grain of salt, and the information that you've been given by the network of global corporate control. This is just, some of it may be correct, but we're going to have to really spend some careful time figuring this out. And when people are, when they're skeptical of me, I can certainly show that I have been doing nothing other than protecting the world's wealth from the crooks that have been trying to steal it. And I've been trying to set up this decentralized currency. This is not something that a person who's trying to perpetuate the elites in their place is going to be doing. So just, use your good senses. And I'm there as a resource. I do have one agenda item that I do want to stay involved in, and that is to protect other whistleblowers. Because when people are able to get information that's damaging out, and they're not punished for it, that's how you know that the information that you're getting is reliable. So and one of the things that I learned at the World Bank is you're supposed to have what they call monitorable indicators to show whether what you're doing is on track or not. And so I'm saying to you that the way you can tell whether I'm on track is whether I am actually making it possible for whistleblowers to disclose things without being retaliated against. That I see as one of the things that I really ought to be doing. But there's no rush to try to change our understanding of the world. We've gotten it really backwards and inside out for the longest time, and we need at some point to figure out what's actually happened. But we don't have to do any of this in a rush. The only thing that we have to rush with is to replace these paper currencies, because this is what happened to us in the Dark Ages, in the 300s. They did the same exact stupid thing. It's called permanent gold backwardation. People who are holding gold they lose their confidence in currency, and they will not sell their gold at any price of the paper currency. And when that happens, you don't have trade. And when you don't have trade, you can't buy groceries. And people starve. So we certainly don't want to replicate this situation. And there's absolutely no reason that we should. There is one other concern, and that is because so many of us have just lost our critical reasoning capabilities, that we're just buying all of these lies from the network of global corporate control. And some of us are panic-stricken and are very easy to frighten. And when you know what lemmings do, they just run off the cliff. So we're going to have to work very hard to reassure people that they shouldn't be running around like chickens without heads. They should start realizing that we're actually in probably better situation than we've ever been before, because more of us know that we've been completely bamboozled, and enough of us know that we can work together, and enough of us are working together. I'm actually enjoying myself immensely right now, because when I go on my Twitter feed and I read about people are doing very serious hard work, and I'm just really enjoying the perspective. And it's also something which is irreversible. Once enough of us realize that the actual reality is very, very different from what's going on, we can straighten things out. Anyway, I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's segment is about getting our bearings. I've had many conversations this past week with good friends, all of whom are helping me and wishing me well. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudes.